It's tournament season at First, and the next big one at Gulfstream and ExpressBet is the Ultimate Betting Challenge this Saturday, March the 2nd. The Ultimate Betting Challenge features every race at Gulfstream Park on Fountain of Youth Day. Buy in for $6,000, $5,000 live bankroll, and compete against players from around the country for massive cash prizes and NHC seats. First will seed 4 NHC seats to the prize pool, and all cash entry fees will be distributed back as prizes. At 150 players, that's $150,000 in cash prizes, plus those 4 NHC seats. Play in the UBC on site at Gulfstream or jump in online with ExpressBet. Head on over to expressbet.com/tournaments for more information and to register to play.
Hi everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at one of the stakes races on Saturday at Aqueduct. Race 7 is the Busher Stakes for the 3-year-old fillies going the one-turn mile on the dirt. Same configuration as the Gotham Stakes, though that being a Kentucky Derby prep. This Busher is a prep race for the Kentucky Oaks, and we do have a prominent possible contender for the Kentucky Oaks making her 3-year-old debut in this race, and that is the number 6, Jodys Pride, who I pegged as the 4-5 morning line favorite. She did everything but get her nose on the wire first in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies last year, was game that day, took a good late run. The eventual winner, just FYI, fell just a neck short at a big price. And Craig, she is clearly the horse to beat as she comes back off the layoff.
Yeah, definitely the horse to beat. No argument at all with your morning line, having her as the odds-on favorite. But I do think there's some other interesting horses in here. It's a fun handicapping contest. Have some horses turning back in distance, something we don't often see from 3-year-olds this time of year.
Let's take a look at the time form US pace projector for this Busher to get a sense of where Jodys Pride and others might be placed in the early stages of this race. Now, Jodys Pride has showed up on the front end along with Regulatory Risk. Jodys Pride, though, she's not a need the lead type. She was actually more of a stalker, really, in all 3 of her races from last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if they use her outside post position to just track the pace early. But there are some others who figure to be gunning for the front end here. You think Regulatory Risk breaking from the rail, likely to be sent towards the front. And also, horses like the number 3, Sicilian Princess, stretching out. She could be a little more forwardly placed than she's shown on the pace projector, but especially the number 4, Princess Mayfair, and the number 7, Carmelina. They've done their best running when they are on the lead. So interesting to see how this pace shakes out in the early stages.
I agree with that fast-paced designation. I also agree that I don't think Jodys Pride will be right up there on the front. She's been in some fast races, so she has run as faster than some of these early, but I suspect she'll be sitting just a little bit off of it. But I do think it's going to get pretty hot.
If they really do go guns a-blazing up front, that's going to help the number 2, Jin Jin, who's got the LP flag, indicating that she has the highest time form US late pace rating in the field and really is the one confirmed closer in this race. Let's go through this field mostly in post position order, beginning with the number 1, Regulatory Risk. And we'll take a look at her last out maiden victory when she was getting her maiden diploma in the 3rd start of her career. She ran into a good one, too, back at Keeneland when she was finishing 2nd behind Tarifa, who has since become one of the top contenders for the Kentucky Oaks following her victory in the Rachel Alexandra recently at the fairgrounds. But Regulatory Risk came back off a brief layoff to break her maiden here, going the same one-turn mile distance at Aqueduct, this over a muddy, harrowed track. Craig, she took a bit of an awkward step in upper stretch at about the 3/16 pole, but seemed to regather herself well to hold off Value Area, who did come back to win her next start after that. Regulatory Risk, she's run some decent speed figures the last couple of times, just probably needs another step forward.
I would say so. That step, maybe it caused her to regress a little bit in speed figures. I'd rather see some forward progression. The main thing I don't like about her is where she's drawn with all the speed to her outside.
The number 2 is Jin Jin. She won the local prep for this, the Busanda, going the 2-turn 9 furlong distance. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race, and this was run over a muddy, sealed track, one of the wetter days at Aqueduct from this winter. And there is Princess Mayfair on the lead, but Jin Jin is going to tackle her as they come into the stretch here and pull away as they come onto the wire. Jin Jin got a very good trip this day, just sitting in behind some dueling leaders, with Princess Mayfair leading that group early, setting what was a pretty fast pace. But I thought she did well to take over mid-stretch here, and you can kind of see Jin Jin pricks her ears about the 16th pole. She's not the most focused coming onto the finish line, but she gets the job done. I'm not even sure she really loved the 9 furlong distance this day, Craig. It just all worked out for her.
I would agree with that. She's one that you might think because she wanted the longer distance that the turn back might be questionable, but I think that was just circumstances there. And I think the 1 turn mile might be right up her alley. It's a little deceiving. She's shown with those red fractions being up close to the pace, but there's a big difference between that 2 turn mile and an eighth and the 1 turn 1 mile.
And I thought she also didn't run as badly as it looked too back in the Goldenrod when she was sort of ripped off the pace early after breaking well. And that was a race where the winner seems like she's a very talented 3-year-old filly, and Jin Jin was just sort of always out of position that day. So she might be a little better than that race indicates. And the Busher definitely makes her, I'm sorry, the Busanda speed figure last time definitely makes her one of the contenders in here. The number 4 is Princess Mayfair. She is the other horse that is coming out of that Busanda. And Craig, there's an argument that she ran the best race that day because she was carving out those fast fractions and just got a little bit tired at the end. She did have some prior 2 turn experience when she went the mile and the 16th over synthetic at Woodbine in her prior start. That was her first race on the dirt last time, but it was a muddy surface. I guess the good news for her is there is rain in the forecast for this Saturday at Aqueduct as well.
Yes, and as you said, she wound up getting the best speed figure from that Busanda where she got a pace upgrade. I'm a little leery of her given all the other speed signed on, the fact that she was all alone on the front end and still got run down over the sloppy track, but I do think she's a contender.
The number 3 is Sicilian Princess, and she is actually a maiden coming into this race, just having one start under her belt where she was second at Turfway Park in the middle of February. So she's coming back with a pretty quick turnaround, just about 3 weeks as she comes back in this Busher for her stakes debut. And she ran fine that day, Craig. It seemed like it was a decent quality maiden field at Turfway Park, but now she's got to stretch out from the 6.5 to a mile, try dirt for the first time. There is some pedigree for her to handle the dirt. She's by Justify, and she's actually a half sister to Dreamlift, who was an upset winner of the Goldenrod when she was a 2-year-old. So there's the pedigree power here, but it's still a big ask for a Sicilian Princess.
It is. We've seen maidens win on this Oaks Trail very recently as last weekend at Oaklawn Park. But this one's a lot to ask. Switching surfaces, stretching out in distance. She'll be a price. Maybe she has a shot, but she's not the kind I want to bet.
The number 5 is Eas Magic, and she's really done nothing wrong so far in her career. 4 for 4, all of her victories achieved by open lengths margins at the end. And she handled her first route test here, going the 2 turn distance of 1 mile and 70 yards at Parks over a good sealed racetrack. And she's actually caught wet tracks in 3 of her 4 starts so far. So any wet conditions on Saturday at Aqueduct should not bother her whatsoever. The problem with her, Craig, is she's just been beating up on weaker, mostly Pennsylvania bred competition. And she's going to have to get a lot faster as she steps up against by far the best field that she's ever faced.
Yes, very much so. And I saw she's actually entered later in the week at Park. So maybe there's another race there for her. Be interesting to see if she runs, but a lot faster is probably the good way to put it.
Next up is that favorite, the number 6, Jodys Pride. We'll take a look at her best performance as a 2-year-old when she was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And Craig, I think it's fair to say that this perhaps wasn't the best edition of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies that we've ever seen. This entire crop just wasn't running particularly fast speed figures last year, but she definitely runs well this day behind the winner, Just FYI. Got a decent trip stalking that one, but the pace was pretty fast and she was never that far off it. And it's pretty game between horses coming onto the finish line, really trying to get to that eventual winner at the end. That was her first route test, stretching all the way out from 6 furlongs, which was the farthest distance she had attempted prior to that. She was a horse that they sort of pointed for turf early in her career. In both of her first 2 starts, she was entered for grass, but she ran well in the dirt. She stepped up going longer on the dirt last time, so feels like, at least for now, she's a dirt horse and a pretty good one at that. And if she comes back in the same kind of form that we saw last year, she'll be tough in this race.
She will. That 103 speed figure, it's the best other than the runner-up from the Busanda who got that 106 due to a pace upgrade. But it did come 4 months ago, so you would expect some improvement from her. Yeah, for me, it's a question of, is this the main goal and how cranked up is she really going to be?
I know you found this trainer stat for Jorge Bru coming back off similar layoffs like this, 4 to 6 months, 120 to 180 days, really hasn't had any success.
No, none at all. And when you look at the hitting the board, it wasn't particularly enlightening. There were a lot of low price horses in there. It should be noted she is right on the lower edge of this with a 120-day layoff. So I don't know how much. He hasn't had a lot of horses of this quality, but I do think it's worth noting for a horse who is going to be odds on.
And then drawn on the outside is the number 7, Carmelina, who is the other Pennsylvania bred entered in this race. We'll take a look at her most recent start when she won a stakes at Laurel, the Jin talking, this one going 7 furlongs. She was able to get clear to the front end here, Craig, and held off a field that was probably just a cut below the type of company that she'll be facing in this Busher on Saturday. But she definitely knows how to win races. This was her 4th victory in 5 prior dirt starts. A really poor effort. One of her only poor efforts last year came when they tried to stretch her out on the turf. My big question with her is the distance, because she's by Maximus Mischief. We'll see if he turns out to be more of a route sire, but he definitely was getting horses to win precociously sprint races as a freshman sire last year. And she's got some sprint and turf on the dam side. So we'll see if she really wants to go the mile here, but this feels like a real test of stamina for her.
It does. I mean, there's no doubt that she's fast. The only time she hasn't been in the lead early was at 5 furlongs, and she was able to get up and win that race. She was very close. I think she's much more of a pace factor than Contender, but if you like her, it's not like her speed figures are that far off of the top horse.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this Busher Stakes. And Craig, I think we're going to agree in this one. We both think that the number 6, Jodys Pride, is the horse to beat, but potentially a little bit vulnerable coming back off the layoff. And it's not like any of these top 2-year-old fillies from last year were running that fast that they'd be invincible to a challenger that could be improving at the right time. And perhaps that's the number 2, Jin Jin, who does figure to get the right kind of trip and pace setup in this race.
Yeah, even though she won that Busanda at 9 furlongs, I like the turn back for her, particularly given the pace scenario. I think there's some question marks. Not that the favorite can't win the race, but it's one of those where there's just a few too many questions for me to take a short price.
Both Craig and I have the number 2, Jin Jin, on top in race 7 at Aqueduct on Saturday, the Busher Stakes. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.